Welcome to Philosophy from the Frontline. This podcast explores the intersection of philosophy, entrepreneurship, and veteran transition. Join us as we delve into the minds of successful entrepreneurs who have made the journey from military service into small business ownership. Our guests will share their insights, experience, and unique perspectives on life, business, and the world around us. Through deep conversations and thought-provoking discussions, we hope to inspire and empower our listeners to tackle their own challenges and achieve their dreams. So sit back, relax, and get ready to explore the world of entrepreneurship from a veteran's point of view. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Welcome back to another episode of Philosophy from the Frontline. This is episode number 85. I have one of my old soldiers on this call, which is, it's rare because we were talking before we started the show that it's been clearly a decade, probably closer to a decade and a half since the last time we saw each other. But I'm not going to take any of his thunder. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up where you are today. Thanks.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Josey Huffman. In a former life, I was Sergeant Huffman, very young sergeant. We deployed, 21 years ago now. It's pretty crazy. Love my time in Blackhawk company and definitely molded a lot of who I am today for sure. I just retired actually in December after 4 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. My path was pretty interesting after I left Blackhawk company. They told me to be a drill sergeant. Went and did that for 3 years on active duty. Pretty amazing experience. And then I had the opportunity because my wife at the time was making enough money for me to transition to the reserve and work on my bachelor's degree. And so I pursued that. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, going to school, pre-med, all that. It was great. And then along comes baby number 2, and we had a decision to make. And everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that. HRC reached out to me and said, hey, we see you have an AGR packet in. Since you're a sergeant first class, the only option you have is recruiting. And I was like, okay. So I volunteered for recruiting. Some may say that's kind of crazy, but I went and saw some great places in recruiting command and ended up here is Cleveland, Ohio area. And when we retired, we decided to stay here. And, it's interesting how we get pulled in different directions, but it just felt right to stay here.
Yeah. And that's important because one of the things, and I don't really, this isn't like a direct question that I ever ask anyone when we talk about retirement, but it's, where do you want to stay? Because a lot of people, aren't sure where they want to end up. And so it could be where they last deployed, what last unit they're stationed in, or, it could be family situation that could change the dynamic of where you end up retiring. But, that's one of the 3 things that you need. You need a job, you need a place to live, and you need your family. And
yeah, absolutely.
So it's definitely something that you have to consider. So you said you just recently retired. So why did you transition out? Did you retire just because it was time for you to go, or you were like, okay, it's time to do something else? Because if you talk to people that have been in the recruiting command for a lot, it's a very, very stressful job, and it's probably a little bit more stressful in the last few years. But certainly something to think about, is when you decide to basically pull the trigger on deciding to leave the military.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think I'm fairly unique in the fact that I really enjoyed my time in recruiting. It was very successful. The problem I had was when you're AGR in USAREC, you are not part of the organization. You are attached, right? We still fall under USARC and all of that. So, we're kind of looked like as the redheaded stepchildren most of the time. They don't offer us leadership opportunities, very few station commander slots, very few first sergeant slots, extremely almost no sergeant major slots. And it's all because of the way we're attached to USAREC, right? So it's really hard for us AGR to flourish and to really get opportunities. I've always been a grab the bull by the horns type of guy. So, I was a sergeant first class when I went into USAREC in 2013, and I retired as a sergeant first class. And that's part of the reason why I got out in 2021, I think. Yeah, I had just finished top 50 in USAREC during COVID. Killing it.
Wow.
At the best NCOER I've ever had. Had an 06 saying this guy needs to be a sergeant major now. OML came out. I was number 6 out of 760. I'm like, yes, I finally made it. I get to, go make my impact as a first sergeant somewhere, which is always, I never had aspirations to make sergeant major, but I wanted to be a first sergeant, right? And they promoted 0 off that list.
Wow.
And to me, that was a sign. It's like, it's time to go. I'm at a point in my life where I've accomplished most everything I wanted to accomplish. I was tired of moving my family every 3 years, especially with my kids getting a little bit older. I'm not bitter. Don't get me wrong. I love my time in the Army. Everything happens for a reason. And so it was just simply, I felt the time was right.
Yeah.
24 with my reserve time, 24 and a half years.
That's a good
my life.
That's a good chunk of your youth that you gave to the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, I used to not understand it. Like when I was like a junior major, like, I don't know why these guys stay in so long or why these guys get out, at 20 or whatever, and you're trying to figure out like, what's the gauge? And then one day, I woke up and I had some people that I worked with, and half of them were great. The other half, I didn't feel like mentoring. And when I felt like I did not want to mentor people anymore, I knew that it was time for me to go. Yeah. Because
I think you just know.
Yeah, I think inherently it's the old soldier syndrome. Like we all used to have the jokes about the old sergeant that we used to have when we were junior guys, but as we got older, we became those people. But one thing that we had that those guys didn't is we had the advantage of wisdom and actually truly being able to test ourselves in combat. And so there's only so much that you can do. And just be like, okay, yeah, like I've been there, done that, literally got the t-shirt, what more do I need to do? What other challenges can the military throw at me, particularly if you've led, at any capacity while you're downrange. And I think that's something that is, it's something that's lost. And I'd love to see the statistics of people that like led in the early part of the war, like before 2010. And like how many of them really stayed in past 20? Because again, like your body will give out before your brain does. But I know that there's a lot of people that I ran into like year 17, 18 in the Army, and they were like, yeah, I'm done, man. I'm ready to go. And you're like,
I mean, I can tell you to really piggyback off what you were saying, how many stay in. If I just look at just my squad alone from when we deployed, none. Actually, I take that back. French retired at 20. Everyone else, did 7, 8, 9 years and just moved on. Yeah.
And I think, and you also have to think the experience that we had in combat was significantly different from a lot of other people in the organization. And that makes a difference. I mean, like, yes, pressure makes diamonds, but it also makes soft meat, what I mean? So it's definitely a unique situation to be in. And like I said, we had the lucky break of going early, being in some pretty intense stuff, and then coming back and realizing you're like, maybe this is like, maybe that's the best that it gets,
Right.
And if you're a young guy and you join the Army for adventure, guess what? You had it. And if it was like at year 3, so be it. And I think that's something that we really don't talk about. And that's kind of the lost part of it is how much exposure did people have? Because the Army's huge. Like when you got active duty guard and reserve guys all deployed together, you're looking at 1 million people, downrange. Like that's a lot of folks over 20 years. But so now that you have retired from the Army, you are now in Cleveland. What are you doing now? Are you hunting jobs? You in a job? Are you doing something fun? Like what's on your docket these days?
Right. So I have always told myself that I don't want to be a statistic when I get out. I don't want to be, homeless on the streets or whatever the case may be, right? How people look at veterans like, oh, there's just another veteran, he's struggling, whatever. And I told myself, I'm not going to be like that, right? So I started my plans in motion to retire 6, 7, 8 years before I retired. I pursued a master's degree. I was using my Army CA to get all these different certifications and whatnot. And I'm sure you're familiar now with SkillBridge.
Yep.
I utilized SkillBridge about 18 months before I could even start SkillBridge. I started looking at opportunities within SkillBridge. I've always been super passionate about resilience, MRT certified level 2, train the trainer type of thing. Loved it. Found a resilience certification online called RBLP. Amazing stuff, how to lead and build resilient teams. So I reached out to this company called Strategic Resilience Group. They have resilience in their name. So like, well, these guys got to do resilience, right? So I found them, checked out their website. Everything looked good. I was like, why not? I'm just going to message the owner of the company on LinkedIn, and I'll probably never hear from the guy. Well, a week later, I heard from him. He was like, hey, I want to set up a meeting with my the other owners of the business. We want to have a chat with you. And I said, keep in mind now, I'm like 18 months before I can do anything. He said, no, it's fine. So I met with the group. It's 3 retired Marine officers. They all been 30 plus years, a couple of pilots in there, an intel guy in there. It was a great conversation, and we kept in touch. Like every 3 months, we were having a Teams meeting, and I was just staying in contact with the owners, help them get me set up as their first SkillBridge
person. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, went through SkillBridge with them. They've done like 3 or 4 sets. It was great. It was just a perfect fit. They do primarily government contracts, but they brought me in to do civilian resilience workshops, things of that nature. And they actually hired me when I was on terminal leave. I started terminal leave on September 27th. I had a job with them on October 2nd.
Wow.
So there was like no gap there. And that RBLP, that was so valuable to me, especially as a leader. We partnered with that company, so now we train their curriculum for people to get certified.
Oh wow,
and
that's awesome.
Fully Army CA funded, so I find fellow soldiers, and it's easy to connect with them because we speak the same language, right? Yeah. So that's what I do. I do a lot of that. I go into corporate America and just teach and preach resilience and leadership. So wow, loving what I do. I work from home.
That's amazing. And again, like I have these conversations with people all the time, and it's always cool to hear like people's story, because some people have like the nightmares, like, oh my gosh, my wife was pregnant, I was about to get married, and I only had $5,000 left in my savings.
Right.
I've heard those stories, but I've also heard stories like yours where it was like I did the work, and ultimately that's what it shows, right? That if you do the work early enough and often, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be head down for 6 months. The last 6 months you're in the uniform trying to transition and get all this stuff lined up. It's do little bits at a time, and if you can do those little chunks at a time, then one, it's less stressful. Plus you don't have near as many requirements, because it's like, oh, well, I've already gone to that resume writing class and I have a resume, so you go to you show the SFL TAP person your resume, and like, all right, you're good. You can miss this hour class or whatever, So by doing that stuff early, and one of the things that, I mention, and I say it all the time, is if you are a soldier, once you make sergeant first class, maybe even staff sergeant, go ahead and form that LLC, right? It's $200. You do it in Delaware, do it LLC, first name, last name, LLC. Then you are now a business owner, and you can do whatever you want underneath that banner, that complies with the business rules in the respective state that you live in. And that sets you up for success. Say, for instance, you took all your training and everything else and you didn't have that opportunity, but you could still teach resilience underneath your own employee, even as a small business owner. So those are kind of ways that you can do things, but all these things take time and a little bit of money. And that's one of the things that, is kind of the shock to the system when you start getting close towards the end, because you don't have somebody setting the schedule. You don't have somebody saying, hey, here's your next deployment that you're going to be out of the house for 12 to 15 months or whatever. You're responsible for yourself. And depending upon where your background is in the military, could be super, super successful, or could not be so successful. That's awesome to hear that you actually use the DoD SkillBridge program. So again, for those of you that are listening that may still be in the uniform, think about that. And it's not a requirement that you have to use the approved list of SkillBridge companies that are on the little roster at SFL Tap. If you have a company that's interested in hosting you, literally all you have to do is sign a memo that says, hey, we're only going to work this person 40 hours a week and we're not going to abuse them. It's essentially what it takes for the Army to say, yeah, you can go do that. And then your commander can sign off on it and you're doing skill bridge. And I've seen a lot of people be incredibly successful doing that, by going to skill bridge and putting a toe in the water of a company that they could potentially be working at when they separate.
Absolutely.
All right. So, we've talked about, getting into the new gig. What was the hardest part about coming out of the military? You noted it before. You stayed in Cleveland. I'm sure there has to be a compelling reason for you to stay because, there's a compelling reason why I stayed in North Carolina, so
sure.
If you mind expounding on that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a house in Georgia because that's before we came to, the reason why we came to Cleveland is because I was a shoo-in for promotion, right? So they were sending me to the senior ops NCO at battalion, and that's an E8 slot, right? And we're like, all right, we're going to be in Cleveland for 3 years, and then we're going to come back to Atlanta. We kind of knew that's what we were going to do. So we had a house there. We loved the house there. Everything was good. Everything was still going to that plan. Let me back up just a little bit. So when we first moved to Ohio, we moved to a city called North Ridgeville, and the neighborhood that we lived in, we didn't like it at all. It was kind of miserable for the kids. We lived on a high traffic street, hard to find friends. It was just kind of miserable, right? And we made a decision that we were going to move because, we want our kids to be happy, right?
Yeah.
So we found a little neighboring town right on Lake Erie called Avon Lake, and the street we moved on was just instantly flooded with kids. It was probably the best summer of their life that we've had in a long time.
Huh.
And they started going to the schools here. They started developing their friends here. And it's really weird because whenever we tried to make plans to go back to Georgia, another obstacle would come. Call it divine intervention, call it whatever you want, right? But something always got in the way when we were trying to go back to Georgia. And the nail in the coffin was we started looking for houses here. It's it's nearly impossible to find a house. Everything's overpriced, this, that, and the other. We're trying to think of every excuse not to stay here. And our realtor was driving by a house one day that came up for sale that was owned by a Coastie. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this, but veterans can assume each other's VA loans. And when you assume another veteran's loan, you get whatever the current value on their loan is, plus whatever interest rate they had.
Oh, wow.
So when the interest rates are 7.5%, and we got locked into this house for 3.1%. So it was a no-brainer. Plus the kids were thriving. They're doing great in school. So it really came down to as simple as that. It's everything just fell into place, and it was made pretty obvious to us that we needed to stay here.
Yeah. That's one of those things that you don't really consider it, but everybody always says it sounds cliche. Oh, there's a reason or a season for everything, right? And it sounds pretty hokey. If you're not a religious person, it's whatever, just coincidence. I had a buddy of mine that was a pastor that would say, coincidences are the times when God chooses to act anonymously, and so you just have to take a note of it and be like, okay, if everything's coming up aces, then it's probably for a reason. And if there's a significant amount of resistance to whatever plan that you have, then it's probably not the right plan.
Right.
And it doesn't even have to be from a spiritual sense. It just has to be could be financially, it could be emotionally. There could be something that is just preventing you from giving your all in that situation. And if you can't give your all in that situation, whatever it is, then you probably should reevaluate. And I think that's a huge part of it. That comes with wisdom and maturity, because I can tell you, when I was a much, much younger man, if I'm wanting to go to Georgia, I'm going to Georgia, regardless of everything else. But as you, age, get more responsibility and have a little bit more knowledge, then you're like, okay, well, I got to do something for my kids. And I think that's you're the second person that I've had a conversation with that has made adaptations in their career today because of considerations of the family. And that would be the one thing that I would encourage people to think about. I used to have a sergeant major once that said this, and it's everything on the left side of your shirt will come off. Like, so if you're in the military, like everything comes off on the left side, like your rank, or not your rank, all your badges and awards and all that other stuff, all that stuff comes off. The one thing that's supposed to stay back when we used to sew stuff on was your name tape, right? Yeah. So your last name. So you want that intact. Yeah. And your name tapes are the only things that used to be sewn on your uniform. So you would be like, hey, look, you want to keep that. And then your U.S. Army, like, yeah, that's something that you want to keep. It's a part of you. But everything else that comes up there, all the badges and tabs and bells and whistles and patches and everything else, that stuff changes frequently. And so being mindful of that, you know, like you want to have the same family that you came into the Army with. It doesn't happen for everyone, but if you have the opportunity to make adjustments to your career track to take better care of your family, I would do that. Same thing in retirement. You know, if an opportunity comes up that creates a great opportunity for your, you know, yourself or your family, you know, then you got to jump on it. So last question that I have for you, and this is one of the things that I always ask. So I know that you said you had gone through some resiliency courses and training. Was there any like particular literature, like was there a book or something that you read during your transition that was like, oh, I have to share this with everybody I know that's leaving the military? Because I like try to build like an informal reading list for folks to like read things that can help them transition, or at least give them a new perspective on where they are.
You know, I don't know, like, I can't think of a book that I read that will be, you know, like the perfect transition type book, but one that really sticks in my mind a lot, and I'm convinced that have you ever read the book Fearless? Let's start with that.
No, I have not.
So I would read that book, and the only reason, and I'm suggesting this mainly to you, it's about a Navy SEAL team, and this guy's, it's a Christian-based book. Just the story is just amazing. It gave me so much courage to do things that I wouldn't necessarily do. But I'm also convinced that that was the SEAL team that was with us while we were in Missoula. I don't know for certain, but I think if you read it and you just pick up a few things, I'm like, I'm kind of starting to put two and two together here. And I saw some of the pictures in the book, and I remember what these guys looked like. But yeah, no, that book, I think for me anyways, personally, Fearless, it helped me just be more courageous, really, because getting out of the military is kind of scary, right? There's so many unknowns, and, you know, you just got to go for it.
Yeah, well, I could tell you, I know in my experience too, that was like on March the 1st of 2020, right before the whole world shut down. I woke up in the morning at 5, and I'm like, I don't have to go to PT. Like, what the hell am I going to do with myself? You know what I mean? And you're like, it's like, this just doesn't seem right. And that's just because like the structure is always there. You really just don't realize how structured your life was for all that time when you're in the military, because of because it's just an ongoing machine. You know what I mean? Like nobody really sees how much motion is going on underneath the hood of a car. But if you would open the hood of a car and step on the gas, you see all the stuff that's moving inside. And that's kind of what the military is. It's just an advantage. Like it looks really cool on the outside, but there's so many things that are moving underneath the hood that you just don't get to catch. But that's a really good recommendation that I will toss out to the crowd. But you have any websites or anything for your organization, your business that you guys are working with that you want to post? We'll drop them in the podcast description. And
I can do that. You want me to just put it in the chat?
Yeah, that would be perfect if you just drop those in the chat, and then we'll add them to the podcast description. But hey, look, like this is awesome, man. Like it's good to catch up with everybody. And like you're like the second Blackhawk dude that I've interviewed this year. I actually had a conference call with Troutman and Schmitz and McFadden last week.
Oh, McFadden. I love that guy.
Yeah. And I will tell you, it's like, the only thing that's happened is like we have a lot more hair than we did when we were younger, which is kind of ironic, right? It's the exact opposite of where we were when we were kids. But I really appreciate you coming on today and just, you know, telling us your story and let my audience know, like, hey, we are small but mighty. But we really appreciate just the ability to have discussions about transition, because the one thing that I know, like transitions, DNA, and combat, they're all unique to the individual, right? Like we all know this. Like we could say it. There's going to be some things. There are going to be markers that are going to be recognizable for everyone, But your experience in combat is different from my experience in combat, even though we were in the same organization, and one of the quotes that really came out of, all the research that Sergeant Troutman did was, he was like, I didn't realize how different everybody's experience was until I read all the after action reports and mapped everything out. And he's like, holy crap, there's a lot of stuff going on. And you're like, yeah, absolutely. And for us to still be able to sit here and talk 20 years later after, some of the stuff that we've been through, it is a blessing just to be, with it enough to have these conversations, but also, to be intact enough to spend time with our families. So really appreciate you coming on.
Can you see this up here, sir?
Yeah, I can.
So this is my prized possession. I bought this when we were in Kuwait on our redeployment.
Yeah.
And I had it signed by every member of the platoon.
Wow.
And I keep that sucker in a frame. It's my wife always rolls around, but that's my prized possession in the house for sure.
Yeah. Well, I tell people all the time, if you come into my office upstairs, I got some knickknacks along the walls, but everything's super, super cool that I have that's associated with the Army. It was a gift from my soldiers, Yeah. It's and that's because that's what matters, being in relationships with the people. And I will tell you, 4th Platoon had their work cut out for them for sure. 3rd Platoon did as well. I think you guys had the best leadership in the organization.
I would agree to that.
But I can also say, we talked about it, we had leaders that weren't so great, but the supporting cast around them was so good that you didn't see the chinks in their armor because everybody around them was like, okay, my boss sucks, but I'm going to cover for him anyway. And again, I think that's just a blessing of the situation that we were in, because we were not cutthroat and you can't fire everybody, and that was one of the things that was one of the things that was a very eye-opening opportunity for a lot of people. It's well, you can't just fire this dude. Even though we're in combat, this sucks. But I also, tell people I think the funniest story from our time downrange was after they pulled Saddam out of the hole and everything, and they were like, oh my gosh, you guys are going home. And
the war's over.
Yeah, everybody was celebrating in our little MWR tent and everybody was excited. And
I was my birthday too. I was like, yes, best birthday present.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And just like Uncle Sam and his infinite wisdom, he kept us.
Oh wait, tomorrow's calling. Let's go spend Christmas tomorrow.
Yeah, let's go hang out by the chicken coop. But really, really appreciate you coming on today. Hey, ladies, absolutely. This is now retired Sergeant First Class Josey Huffman. He was one of the greats in Blackhawk Company 123. Be on the lookout. Again, I'll tag Sergeant Troutman's podcast in the podcast description as well. So if you haven't listened to that one, listen to it. The book comes out in less than 30 days. We're about 30 days out. Yeah, I think it's going to be good. I know that he and I have had quite a few conversations, and we've been pulling the thread, and I just keep anytime I find something related to the deployment, I dump it on. It's it might be too late, but this could go in your second book. But I think he's done the yeoman's work, and it's going to be a good piece of history. And somebody's got to tell the story before we're too old not to tell it ourselves. So, Thanks again. This has been Rob Robinson for Philosophy from the Frontline. This is episode number 85, and we'll see you guys on the high ground. Thanks.
All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to Philosophy from the Frontline with Rob Robinson. We will bring you more interesting veteran transition stories, veteran advocacy, and more information in veterans transition in general on a podcast platform near you. This is Philosophy from the Frontline, and we'll see you on the high ground. Thanks.